Hello, everyone. This is Will Reynolds. I'm going to be leading this training today. I'm happy to have you join me. This training is being presented by the Department of Health and Welfare, Public Health Division on cyanoHABs. So if you have any questions at the end of the training, please feel free to email me. My email address is listed on the slide you can see here. That's will.reynolds@dhw.idaho.gov. And if for any reason I'm unavailable, please go ahead and just email eh@dhw.idaho.gov to find an individual that can provide you with the appropriate information. So in terms of what we'll be covering today, I'm going to do an introduction of cyanoHABs, basic biology and ecology related to these blooms, as we'll speak more about in just a few moments. We'll talk about cyanobacteria and algal blooms, what they are, where they come from, why they appear, and when. We'll talk about cyanotoxins. So these are toxins that come from some cyanobacteria. Common types of toxins, exposure routes, health effects of different toxins, and when health advisories are issued related to these toxins in recreational water bodies and drinking water systems. Following that, we'll skip over to cyanoHABs in news. So I have a brief video for you, about 5 minutes long, that I think does a great job of covering what's dangerous about cyanoHABs, as well as getting a glimpse of what they look like in the water. We'll talk about cyanoHABs in Idaho. I have several different news stories that we'll link to, and if you have access to a hard copy, or excuse me, not a hard copy, but a digital copy of the presentation in the form of a PDF or a PowerPoint document, you'll be able to click on those news links to get a better sense of what they're referring to, and just dive in a bit deeper if you're interested. We'll talk about the roles of different agencies in Idaho, including my own role at the Department of Health and Welfare, the role of the Department of Environmental Quality, both at the state office and at the regional offices around the state. Talk about the role of the public health districts, as well as some of our other partners, including Idaho Fish and Game, Idaho State Department of Agriculture, and a few others. We'll go over the importance and processes for monitoring and reporting on HABs, important contacts related to HABs, links, different documentation, frequently asked questions, where to find out more about where there are current health advisories that have been issued, and more. All right, without further ado, let's get started. So at this point, you may have noticed that I've referred to the subject of this presentation in a couple of different ways, both as cyanoHABs and as HABs. So the cyano comes from cyanobacteria, and these are essentially what compose HABs. HABs is short for harmful algal blooms. So these will go by several different names. We generally refer to them as HABs, but cyanoHABs is sort of the preferred terminology in Idaho. So HABs, harmful algal blooms, blue-green algae, cyanobacterial HABs, or cyanobacteria. So cyanobacteria, they may produce toxins which can harm humans and animals. When conditions are right, cyanobacteria multiply rapidly. The rapid proliferation is commonly referred to as a bloom. And different cyanobacteria can produce different toxins and different symptoms in those impacted depending on the route of exposure and what toxin they've been exposed to. So although cyanobacteria do occur naturally and are an important part of the environment, it's reasonable to suspect that the increase in their presence, density, and duration may be due to human-caused conditions and activities. So these activities might include increased runoff, um, increased nutrients in the environment due to humans, um, increased water temperatures, due to the climate, as well as due to, thinking of Lake Cascade, for example. The lake is mostly surrounded by housing. And so cutting away the trees, reducing the amount of shade could further lead to HABs appearing in those types of locations. Increases in presence, density, and duration across Idaho is impacting both the health of the environment, public health, and recreation. So when we think about aquatic environments, oftentimes we're thinking about fish and other animals and plants that occupy these types of environments. CyanoHABs, when they bloom, they can reduce the oxygen content of aquatic environments, which can, really constricts the needs of plants and healthy algae within the ecosystem, and can cause sort of a deterioration of those environments. Now, fish, generally speaking, have matured in environments where cyanoHABs, cyanobacteria are present. So they are not as easily impacted as other animals and people are. However, they are bioaccumulators. So we do encourage fishermen to thoroughly clean and skin any fish that they intend to eat, as well as to rinse the fillets thoroughly. So it's actually the fillet, the meat, the muscle that, as far as we know, accumulates the least amount of cyanotoxins. And so it's actually, luckily in this case, the safest portion of the fish. However, if you have, for example, a dead fish on the edge of a lake or river, or excuse me, a lake or reservoir, for example, in some cases rivers, and your dog, for example, might eat them. They're not exactly going to take the time to skin and gut these fish, and so they may be exposed to high levels of toxins, causing different types of health impacts, as we'll get into in just a few minutes here. In terms of wildlife and livestock, again, as I've just mentioned, both wildlife and livestock, as well as pets, really, can be highly impacted by the effects of these toxins in water bodies. And that's largely to do with the fact that, they're just more likely to drink from water bodies containing these toxins. As humans, generally speaking, we know better than to drink from water bodies that contain these toxins, you know, lakes, reservoirs. We don't consider these uh, clean sources of drinking water, and so we tend to avoid it unless it's incidental. And then finally, drinking water can be impacted as well. So I believe in the neighborhood of 5% of drinking water sources in Idaho are drawn from surface water. Surface waters are those that tend to be uh, more disposed to high levels of cyanobacteria in the summer. And so that can lead to, if inadequate filtration is present, that can lead to illnesses and, chronic illnesses caused by HABs in drinking water as well. And we'll discuss that a bit later as well. Moving forward into a sort of summary of cyanoHABs in Idaho. Um, cyanoHABs occur in water bodies across Idaho. And of course, it's not limited to Idaho. CyanoHABs occur across the United States and across the world, really. Um, Idaho is, at this point, we don't suffer as greatly as many of the warmer climates do. You know, in particularly in the southeast. Um, but there is concern that it is increasing as we move forward through the years. There are no federal or state regulations that require the testing of waters for HABs, and that's neither in drinking water or recreational water. There are advisory levels, which we'll get into in a little bit, um, that many states pursue for the purposes of public health protection, but there are no specific strict requirements that it be tested for in either recreational or drinking water sources. There are no funds that are apportioned for cyanoHABs through the Idaho state government. My position as the HABs coordinator with the Department of Health and Welfare is the only position in the state that is funded by a grant um, through the federal government. Um, and then we just have many state partners that assist in executing the program. We do rely on coordination and cooperation between state and local governments and private entities for health. Some of these would include the Department of Health and Welfare, Department of Environmental Quality, the Public Health Districts, Idaho Fish and Game, Idaho State Department of Agriculture. We also rely on assistance from Idaho Power, the State Parks and Recreation, and other entities, as well as the public, really. There's a tremendous reliance on the public for reporting HABs when they believe that they've identified them. If they are recreating in water bodies and hopefully not, but if a child becomes sick, if a dog becomes ill, things of that nature, hopefully they're reporting it to us and we're able to uh, complete a visual inspection and sample as necessary to determine whether uh, a HAB is present and take further steps to protect public health. So getting into a little bit more specific language about cyanobacteria. So these are photosynthetic bacteria, which means that often um, they've been confused for algae. The name blue-green algae is synonymous with cyanobacteria, and you can see in the pictures on the right different examples of cyanobacterial blooms uh, and the associated colors. So you might see blue, green, brown, red. It can appear in the form of paint, foam, scum, or mats. And then you have benthic versus planktonic blooms. So benthic blooms, these are cyanobacterial blooms that occur in mats, commonly at the bottom of water bodies where they're obviously more difficult to see because they're at the bottom of the water bodies. Then these cyanobacterial blooms are clinging to rocks and debris down there, so it can make it a challenge to identify them. And then contrasting that with planktonic blooms, which occur in the water column or at the top of water bodies where they're more easily visible. Um, these are far more simple to identify in this case. And as I had mentioned, cyanobacteria are ubiquitous in nature. So these blooms do occur in fresh as well as salt water, although they do occur in those situations with, producing different toxins, most likely, and coming from different types of cyanobacteria in fresh versus salt water. I really just like this picture. I think it's a great illustration of the sorts of conditions that contribute to cyanobacterial blooms. So we have here an example of a lake, sort of you could see off to the left side. There's some agricultural land use. There's some residential land use around the side of the lake. And toward the back, you can see some industrial usage and the city in the far back of the image, as well as off to the right, a drinking water intake. So we've had sort of a bit of information about how drinking water can be impacted. So here it illustrates that this drinking water may be pulled directly off the surface of this uh, hypothetical lake in this situation, and the water, the public water system, whether it is a public water system or a private water system, may not be familiar with HABs and may not be aware of whether or not they have adequate filtration to prevent themselves or the users of that water from becoming ill due to HABs. Um, so sort of returning to the other elements that are present in this image, the farmland, industrial effluents, wastewater effluents, all of these things can contribute to nutrient imbalances in the water, which can cause blooms. And the cyanobacteria nutrients they prefer are similar to algae and plants. They like nitrogen, they like phosphorus. Once there's an imbalance of nutrients and really the water temperature, when the water becomes warm, when it's stagnant, um, it contributes greatly to these rapid blooming of cyanobacteria, leading to a harmful algal bloom, a HAB. So what factors are influencing these blooms? Yes, sort of as I mentioned on the previous slide, warm water temperatures, could be um, increasing due to the climate, or the removal of aspects, features of the landscape that contribute to shading in lakes, reservoirs, and other water bodies. You have abundant sunlight. Again, removal of trees and other landscape aspects can contribute to additional sunlight in areas. Extreme weather events might contribute to land runoff of nutrients associated with agriculture, dairy operations, um, industrial effluents, things of that nature. And then, of course, as I mentioned also, nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus. These are really the primary nutrients in terms of runoff that we're referring to that cause excesses in blooms and increases in their likelihood. So in Idaho, cyanoHAB season generally peaks in July and August. However, blooms can persist well into the fall and beyond. CyanoHABs continue year round in some warmer climates. So I'm thinking of like Southern California or Florida, um, where HABs can just continue year round. And here in Idaho, generally once the recreation season has ended, we may lift any recreational advisories that are still present. And we don't necessarily have um, the budget, the materials to continue testing, or really even the personnel to continue testing well into the fall and winter. So it makes it difficult to say, um, how long these HABs are persisting in different water bodies. So jumping from cyanobacteria and HABs themselves into the toxins that are uh, released by them. So there are different groups of toxins that are um, grouped by what areas of the body they impact. So we have neurotoxins, which of course, affect the brain and nervous system. Two examples of that would include anatoxin A and saxitoxin. These are both cyanotoxins. There are dermatoxins, which are skin irritants. There are cyanotoxins that are dermatoxins, so you would see, skin irritation, blisters, rashes, things of that nature. Cytotoxins, these lead to cell death, and hepatotoxins, which primarily affect the liver. So these would include microcystins and cylindrospermopsins. So microcystins and cylindrospermopsins, these are the two cyanotoxins uh, that we have health advisory, recreational health advisory, as well as drinking water health advisory levels for. And we'll get into that just a little bit more as far as the details in just a moment. And yes, of course, these toxins are toxic to humans and animals. Idaho agencies will respond to reports of animal illnesses by performing visual inspections and sampling, posting signage with animal safety and other information, and other means of informing the public as well, such as social media. However, Idaho does not issue health advisories specifically for the protection of animals, which again are more likely to be impacted than humans because of their tendency to drink from their affected water bodies and for other reasons that are less well researched as well. So finally, yes, I've mentioned health advisories and recreational health advisories several times at this point. So I wanted to make sure that I included this chart in the presentation. Um, so you can see across the top, we have two different types of toxins listed. We have microcystins and cylindrospermopsins. Um, and when we are looking to issue a recreational health advisory, generally we will see the magnitude of microcystins at 8 or more um, micrograms per liter, and then cylindrospermopsins at 15 or more micrograms per liter. And it can be tricky to really issue a health advisory associated with these numbers because cyanotoxins, cyanobacteria, HABs, they don't occur um, equally, fluidly across lakes, reservoirs, other water bodies. They tend to exist and have stronger characteristics as well as stronger health effects in certain locations, whether they've drifted from one side of a lake or reservoir to another and have accumulated in a particular spot. You may see, in essence, no toxins in one part of a lake, river, reservoir, whatever it might be. And then on another side, in another area, you may be in excess of the recreational health advisory. And I also wanted to make note that although these are the two toxins that we have recreational health advisories for, and in fact the two toxins that we have drinking water health advisories for, Idaho is currently working toward recommendations for issuing health advisories associated with the neurotoxin, cyanotoxins, anatoxin A, and saxitoxin. So this chart here illustrates, the drinking water um, advisory levels. So you can see that it's separated by microcystins and cylindrospermopsin for small children, bottle-fed infants, and preschool children, and then separated to school-age children and adults. So of course, school-age children and adults, because of their size in particular, is going to take more of those toxins to impact them. Um, so we've talked a little bit about surface water intakes and private drinking water, where they may not be familiar with these types of toxins and so may not be aware of whether or not they have adequate filtration for these toxins. And these are, again, non-regulatory concentrations, which, when in drinking water, are not expected to cause adverse non-carcinogenic effects over specific durations of exposure. So while these levels do help to keep individuals safe, they're not necessarily completely protective. So it's important to be aware, be familiar with these levels and with the toxins themselves. Um, if you have family or friends that use surface water in areas where you're aware that cyanotoxins, cyanobacteria, HABs occur, um, point them to some education. Make sure that they're familiar, and yeah, let's try to keep the public safe. So one of the challenging thing about cyanotoxins is that they don't necessarily have to be ingested in one specific way to cause symptoms. And one of the challenging things about identifying cyanotoxin exposure is that it can appear in many different forms, many different symptoms, even for an individual uh, toxin. So you can be affected by dermal contact with the skin, which, as I mentioned, may cause blisters or rash, skin irritation, may ingest water incidentally um, while swimming. You may inhale aerosolized toxins, for example, while jet skiing, boating, water skiing, etc. Can occur through drinking the water, which similar to incidental ingestion. However, it is intentional, as we've discussed, poor filtration, um, or just a lack of awareness. You might ingest it in the form of food. Again, with fish in particular, um, it tends not to accumulate as much in the meat, but it can still be present. And so it's important to be aware when uh, fishing that you should just always be on the lookout for HABs and consider whether or not you want to ingest the fish or whether you would prefer to catch and release should you be concerned that there is a significant HAB in the area where you're fishing. And then, of course, pet exposures. Um, Again, these animals have a tendency to drink from these water bodies more so than people would. So they're far more likely to suffer the effects, and not only through drinking water, but as well through if they're swimming around through HAB, get out of the water. Um, the cyanobacteria will cling to their paws, to their fur, and they'll begin to lick it out, and they can be exposed that way as well. I thought this was a great graphic that I borrowed from the Clean Water Fund. So go ahead and take a look through the different symptoms that are mentioned, both in humans and pets. It is important to note, so I just want to read through this brief few sentences at the top. Not all cyanotoxins lead to all of these impacts. These impacts are caused by microcystins and cylindrospermopsin, again, those that we have recreational and drinking water health advisory levels for. And the two cyanotoxins that EPA, and these are the two, excuse me, these are the two cyanotoxins that the EPA has issued health advisories for. So you can see by the different sources of the different routes of exposure, excuse me, different routes of exposure can produce different health effects. So at the top left here, you can see that it's indicating that this is causing issues in the brain. So the source here, the exposure route, is ingestion. It can lead to headache, incoherent speech, drowsiness, loss of coordination. Moving to the other side, halfway down, you can see organs. um, through the source of ingestion. This is the exposure route. Ingestion can cause kidney damage, abnormal kidney function, and liver inflammation. And so I would encourage you to, if you have access or just able to pause the video and take a few minutes to look at all the different exposure routes and symptoms that are associated, both in humans and pets as well. Moving on, um, we have several examples here of cyanoHABs in the news in Idaho. There's a variety of stories, really, if you just, Google um, cyanobacteria or HABs or harmful algal blooms in Idaho, you'll get a wealth of stories from across the state. And I made a few selections here. If you have access to the PowerPoint document or a PDF of this presentation, I would encourage you to go through it. And I have linked the actual news stories through each of these headlines. So if you're interested, go ahead and go through and read them. I found all of these to be helpful when I started in this position, and it's excellent to get an idea of how the public is sort of set up to perceive these blooms and the toxins that are associated with them. So I certainly encourage you to um, take some time, whether you're going through the internet search or through the actual presentation itself, go and read some of these news stories, watch some of these news stories, and get a better sense of how the public might perceive uh, cyanoHABs because of how they're portrayed in the media. Yeah, so as I've mentioned, keeping the public safe from HABs is a collaborative effort. We rely heavily on members of the public to report potential HABs. Once reports are received, state and local agencies play various roles in the response. So you can see here that there are, Fish and Game, Health and Welfare, the state of Idaho icon in the top right to represent each of the different health districts. And then, of course, the Department of Environmental Quality, the State Parks and Recreation Office, and the public themselves. So in my role with the Department of Health and Welfare, and really our role as a whole, um, is in health education and determining whether advisories need to be issued, whether press releases need to be issued associated with cyanoHABs, keeping our website updated, including the recreational health advisories map, which I have a link to coming up here shortly in the presentation, which actually we use to show the public specifically where there are ongoing cyanoHABs above the recreational health advisory levels. We also rely on the public health districts to provide additional health education, um, more specific to their local areas, as there are 7 of them that we rely on, and just one the Department of Health and Welfare main office where we address those types of questions. And then the Department of Environmental Quality typically is the one that receives the initial reports, whether it's from the public or others. Um, in response to those reports, they'll do visual inspections. If they confirm using a visual inspection that they would like to move forward with testing, they'll take a sample, they'll submit it for testing in coordination with the Department of Health and Welfare. They'll make a determination about whether a public health threat is posed. Uh, Depending on those outcomes, they'll post signage at entryways and at common recreation sites and other locations where HABs have been identified and confirmed. Keep their website updated. They house test results, monitoring, and environmental education is also an important part of their role here. And just a few slides from now, after I go through a little bit of information on who to contact in what situations, I'll go through some different web addresses that will that you can use as a resource for either providing more information on the health effects, where there are current advisories, and um, frequently asked questions about HABs and other information as well. So on the reporting side, this is really intended for public health districts and employees specifically. Um, if you as a public health district employee receive a call or an email, whether it's to report a harmful algal bloom or just get more information about it, there are specific people that you can contact, specific resources that you can use to provide that information. So if they're reporting on a HAB that they have observed, make sure that information gets to your environmental health division director. Um, Take their contact information if they're willing to provide it to you. If you're able to get a description of any symptoms that their friends, their family, their pets might be experiencing, that's great. Um, and then pass that information along to your environmental health division directors, who can then summarize the information, get more information from the complainant if necessary, and then provide that information to the Department of Environmental Quality and the Department of Health and Welfare. So that would be currently Beth Spelsberg. As you can see toward the bottom of this chart here, her email and phone information, myself, Will Reynolds, and then the environmental health manager here at the Department of Health and Welfare, Brigitte Grunberg. So the primary thing that's of importance here is that we're providing information, and that if there's a report of a suspected HAB, that we're not losing that information. We're getting it to the appropriate people. Um, so initially, again, through your environmental health division director, who can then provide the information to Beth Spelsberg at the Department of Environmental Quality, and myself and Brigitte at the Department of Health and Welfare. Just a bit more contact information here as well. If you do have questions, DEQ regional offices, again, are the ones who are primarily responsible for doing visual inspections, sampling, and sending samples away for testing. They do a lot of communication with the public as well, and host a test results and reporting webpage. So on the left, you can see here the first column is related to the public health district area. And the corresponding regional offices at DEQ. So depending on which health district you're in, it shows you which regional office and which employee you can get in contact with to make specific reports or ask certain questions about HABs in the local area. And as I mentioned here, I have several different links that are important to this program. First on the list, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Recreational Health Advisories webpage. So this webpage includes information about really recreational waters and public health in a number of different ways. So we have information on HABs there, fish consumption advisories, uh, recreational water bodies that might be closed due to associated illnesses, swimmer's itch, just a wealth of information there from both state and federal agencies. And it includes a map that shows current advisory levels as well. So if somebody calls you up and is interested in whether there's a current HABs advisory on like Lake Fernan or Fernan Reservoir, for example, you can direct them to that web page, and if there is an advisory, there will be an icon located above Fernan, which will display more information about the advisory, whether or not there's an advisory issued there, and if there is, more information about that advisory. So I encourage you to go to that website and get a bit more familiar with it, just in case um, my explanation doesn't give a clear idea of what that looks like, but it's certainly a helpful resource to have. The next link here refers to the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Recreational Waters webpage. So this provides a lot of similar information to that health advisories webpage. Again, swimmer's itch, HABs, um, local beaches that have been closed down for a number of reasons, such as E. coli, associated with whether it's associated with diarrhea, or what it might have been. It's a good resource to have just to ensure that you're aware of the risks in recreational waters and keep yourself informed. The next website, test results and online reporting form. So this is the DEQ site that I was referring to. If you visit this site location, you'll find test results on HABs for different water bodies across the state, which have likely been inspected due to a public report or other entities report. It'll tell you whether those results were above or below the recreational health advisory levels. And then there's a number of ways also on that website to report HABs that you might see while you're out and about. So there's an online reporting form as well as an email and a phone number that you can call to make reports. And, whenever we make those reports, we like to see pictures. And if you're able to recall the specific location on the lake, reservoir, or other water body where you saw the HABs, that's very helpful for us too when we do visual inspections. The next link here is just our frequently asked questions webpage. So if you have somebody that gets in contact with you, and it's not specifically about anybody being sick or a pet being sick after visiting a water body, it's not necessarily to submit a report on what they believe to be a harmful algal bloom. They're just looking for more information. This is a great resource to point them to. Again, cyanoHABs frequently asked questions really gives a great summary in a short period of time of the sort of background and health impacts and other information on HABs in the state of Idaho and in general. If you don't, referring to the public health districts, if you don't have any flyers and posters um, related to HABs in your local area, this next link is where you can get them. You can simply order them from this link and we will print and provide them to you. They're great to keep on hand just in case you need to respond quickly in a situation in the future to get information out that's protective of public health. So if you're not aware of whether or not you have this information ready to go in the form of flyers and posters, and you think that it would be a good idea, we certainly encourage you to visit this website, check out the resources that we have, and submit an order, and we'll get those to you as quickly as we can. And these last few links, really just for fun, these are a couple of satellite imagery tools that we use to look at HABs or the possibility of HABs in the local area. Essentially, these, give us an idea of how likely it is that we have a harmful algal bloom at any given water body across the state. And so in conclusion, cyanoHABs are composed of innumerable toxin-producing cyanobacteria. Of course, not all cyanobacteria produce toxins. However, like plants, cyanobacteria are photosynthetic. They rely on nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus and grow more rapidly in warm conditions in slow-moving and stagnant waters. toxins produced affect pets, wildlife, and livestock, as well as humans, who may be exposed by inhalation, ingestion, or dermal contact. Animals may die from exposure and typically suffer more significant symptoms because they intentionally ingest more water. If you're contacted by a member of the public who is reporting a potential HAB or is reporting their own illness, that of an animal, friend, or family member that has recently visited a water body with an active HAB, and this link here will take you to the recreational advisories map, and has associated symptoms, ensure that you follow proper communication channels and, if necessary, refer to the fact sheet. And that's the conclusion of the presentation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. Again, my name is Will Reynolds. You can reach me at Will, that's WILL, Reynolds, REYNOLDS, at dhw.idaho.gov. And if I'm unavailable, you can also reach out to Brigitte Grunberg, whose information for contact is included in the chart on the previous slides, and the which is short for environmental health, at dhw.idaho.gov if we're unavailable. Thank you for participating today. I hope you learned something. And yes, please feel free to reach out. Take care. Goodbye.